Thank you guys for going through and helping us get some insight into what you're looking to do with the cloud, because we're talking about cloud today. We're talking about cloud migrations and all sorts of good stuff. And so, as Erica mentioned, my name's Adam Jorgensen. I'm happy to welcome you to our training on the T's on Tuesday. We are super excited to have you here. I'm the president of consulting for Pragmatic Works, and so I've been helping customers really design, build, manage, and optimize their data estates for about 15 years. And the last 10 years or so, that has, of course, included the cloud. And I was actually in Redmond at Microsoft headquarters a couple weeks ago, and then we were at Microsoft Ignite last week. And I said, this would be a really great topic because there's so many things happening and so many questions that we get from customers and so much confusion around how do we really sort of move our organization to the cloud, and how do we have the right conversations internally about it, and how do we drive past some of the political challenges and some of the budget challenges, and so that's a kind of an all-day topic, right? So I've condensed down some of our sort of best practices, if you will, the way that we approach it with customers, the way that we help a lot of the market leaders really think about this kind of thing. And so, we're taking a strategy that we use to help customers get confidence and remove fear and increase that bottom line performance. And we're trying to distill it down into about 40 minutes for you so that we can have time for questions. So I apologize if it feels like I smooth over a few areas. I'm happy to answer questions on any and all of it as we get toward the end of the session. So please stick around. I do expect a lot of questions. And so as we kick off, if I had a plan that would mean millions of dollars on your bottom line every year, I believe that you would probably be interested in hearing about that. Most organizations exist primarily to make money. Even nonprofits exist to make money so that they can use that money to serve, right? It's very difficult to grow and sustain a business if you're not continually seeing improvement in the top and the bottom line. And so, today we're going to talk about what are most companies doing with the Microsoft Data and Cloud platform. And I'm assuming most of you are here so you can start learning how to use the cloud to really transform your business. And so I'm going to share with you what a majority of the companies are doing with the cloud, how you can speed past them to lead your markets, because they're all making some of the same mistakes. And if you can avoid some of those mistakes and not get caught up in them, then you are going to have a much, much better go at getting the cloud integrated. You guys know who we are, Pragmatic Works. We've spent the last decade designing and integrating data estates for over 7,000 customers. And so, a lot of this is coming from that expertise. And we've created tools and methods and programs designed to help customers really be cloud confident. And when I started talking to a lot of customers more and more about the cloud over the last couple of years, the biggest thing that I saw, and I see it a little bit in the poll questions, is people kind of get where their company's trying to go. You see some opportunities where the cloud would be beneficial. We kind of get it on principle, right? The cloud is good. We should be there for at least part of our environment, and hybrid's probably really the only real way to go. But at the end of the day, most of what we're missing is confidence. And so I see a lot of organizations, planning to plan, creating, many plans to, to try to make this kind of thing happen. And ultimately where they're really struggling is just getting traction. And so what I want to try to help you with today is to talk through a mindset shift, a little bit of a mindset shift, and then give you confidence that I think the things you're thinking about are really good, that they're viable, that they're working, and that you can have confidence not only in yourself, but in your peers and in your plan, and hopefully in us, because you're here learning together with us. And so if I take a look at the very next slide, there's a scenario I want you to think about. You've won the lottery. So what would you do if you won $10 million in the lottery this week? That's pretty good. Somebody else a few weeks ago won $526 million. I don't even know what I would do with $526 million. I'd probably come back to work the next day, but we'll figure it out. So chances are you take care of your family and friends, right? Pay off some debt, put some away for a rainy day. I would buy a boat. I would get a big boat. You can see on there the boat that I want. That's a pretty big boat. It's very expensive. I would need probably more than $10 million for that. The one on the right is probably the one I would get away with. Maybe the one my wife would let me get. Maybe a kayak, something like that. Something still fun, not quite as flashy, but would still get me where I want to go. And the interesting thing that, and why I start with the lottery, is because you have won the lottery. You didn't win a cash lottery where you get to take home $10 million. We don't do those kind of giveaways here. I apologize for that. But many of you are charged with managing your data and your applications, and that they're the most valuable assets your company has, and you're in charge of it. And leading IT organizations take the mentality that they've hit the jackpot, and they have to make the most of this incredible asset. And that's really where the right cloud or hybrid strategy comes into play, right? And so first thing they know is they have to take care of their friends. That means resolving long overdue business requests and needs. The cloud helps us do that. It gives us more agility, faster access to resources, more flexibility in the way that we deploy things. It gives us the ability to have people all over the world work on things without having to be tied into a data center or tied into some very sort of archaic infrastructure. Second, they know they need to pay off their technical and cultural debt. That means they get rid of their old hardware. They up-level their team skills. 38% of you said skills were a challenge. I totally get it. If you think about when you first had to learn Windows Server and networking and SQL Server and BI, that didn't take you a couple of weekends and an hour-long webinar, right? You put a lot of time and effort into that. And now there's a whole new platform where a lot of things cross over, but a lot of things are done differently. And so, smart organizations are investing there, right? They're paying off that technical and cultural debt by getting rid of the old hardware, helping the team really up-level their skills, and reclaiming a lot of that management time and overhead with some of the benefits and automation that they get from a cloud or hybrid architecture. And then they put some away for a rainy day. They start to plan for what the future cloud solutions could be, right? What can they build with these new assets? Now that their data warehouse is in the cloud, now that their BI is in the cloud, how do we integrate advanced analytics or streaming analytics, or how do we leverage something like Data Lake or Spark or Hadoop as part of that architecture? Where does it fit? Because now it's as easy as spinning up a service and connecting it to begin experimenting and to begin building. It's not a 6-month architecture design and review process. It's just there. It's ready to go. Power BI is right there, ready to connect. So many options are available once that data is next to the services or connected to those services in the cloud. And last but not least, they buy the boat or whatever, right? I would buy a boat or whatever. They make business wishes come true with the time and capability to partner on these new solutions and create value together with the business. That's all any organization really wants, right? Is to create value, to work effectively together. Nobody wants this sort of business versus IT friction that's been around for too long, frankly, right? Smart leading organizations are breaking down those walls by making things available, accessible, flexible, all those IBLE words that I can think of, right? And they sound a little cliche, right? But I'm talking to you today about how they're really doing that and why it's so important. So first, a couple of quick statistics. Now, I hate using statistics like this in presentations because you never know really where they came from, and I could have just made them up, and I actually didn't cite them on the slide, so I apologize. But Pragmatic Works and our customers have participated in 2 of the largest cloud studies in the last 12 months, and they're done by 2 very different organizations. And what came out of that is that cloud, these are their words, right? Cloud is the new normal for enterprise applications. 70% of organizations have adopted the cloud for some portion of their application platforms. And that's along the lines of what I'm seeing here. I mean, you guys were at about 40% and 40% not. Business and data analytics are leading the adoption drive in 2016 and 2017. We definitely saw that more heavily weighted in the poll numbers. In the next 18 months, most IT infrastructure will be cloud-based. Now, I disagree with this slightly, only because I would put the word new in there. Most new IT infrastructure will be cloud-based. But I think that what we're seeing is a significant push to move systems into a hybrid or cloud environment. And among these companies that are in the cloud, optimizing their new clouds is the #1 initiative. And so what does that mean? You're in this new world now, right? And the cloud costs by the hour, and that's scary. It's no more write a check in January, use it all you want all year. It's the cloud has a run rate like a utility. And so just like, you know, I'm bad about sometimes turning the light off when I leave a room. If I'm bad about that in the cloud, that costs more than the LED light bulb in my house, right? That could be expensive. Pragmatic Works suffered from this at one point. We had a consultant who accidentally left a whole bunch of stuff we spun up for a class turned on over a weekend, and that was a fairly significant bill for, you know, a 40 to 50 person training class and all of their infrastructure. So, you know, we worked that out and we worked through it, and you will too. But the #1 thing that companies are trying to do is get to the cloud safely and securely, and then immediately optimize their footprint, right? It's kind of a two-step process. We'll talk about, you know, what that means and how we can actually make that happen. So we talked about how you won the jackpot, what's important to do when you win that jackpot. You have won that jackpot. And so we know what the leading IT groups are doing. So what are you doing, right? So remember, your data is the most valuable thing your company has. So what's your approach to, you know, caring for it, growing it, using it, etc.? If you had that $10 million, I guarantee you would get expert advice, right? You would not take it and put it in your savings account at Bank of America. You certainly wouldn't put it at some of the banks that have had challenges and other financial institutions. So you would have expert advice. You have a financial planner, an accountant, a retirement person, a lawyer, somebody, right, who's giving you advice to help you make the most of this opportunity. People show up to the lottery with a whole team of people around them to make sure they don't screw up and lose some of that value because they just don't know. You can't be a financial planning expert and a legal expert and a retirement expert and etc., right? You can't do all those things as one person. And so we have to make smart choices, right? And bring the right people together around us. And as we do that, we have to look at sort of what's that financial planning equivalent of our data strategy, right? That's kind of how I think about it. And so a long time ago, people used to bury their money underground in pickle jars. My grandmother, until the day she left to go to heaven, still had a pickle jar in the garage with cash money in it. This is kind of like your typical on-premise data center, right? I know where it is. I feel comfortable. I can walk in and touch it. I feel like it's very secure, but it's not necessarily, right? We know that. We know that people walk in and out of those data centers all the time. We know that things can happen. You're actually at much higher risk with your own data center for accidental things than you are with a public cloud data center, which is much more secure, much more regulated. Other people who are less disciplined than the pickle jar folks bet on things like hot stock tips or horses at the track, right? You take that money and you go to Vegas and, you know, let it all ride on red for one spin on the roulette wheel, right? This is the person, you know, who moved to a local colo because they got sold that, oh, we're also the cloud, right? Cloud is just hosting. That's all it is. The cloud is not just hosting. You can use it for just hosting, but it is really so much more. It's basically a service-based platform for you to expand into, right? Well, a colo is not going to be able to give you that. Colo can give you hosting. Maybe they drop it a few dimes, or they manage some of the admin for you. But a colo is not the same as the Microsoft Azure cloud, for example. So it rarely works out the way that customers think that it's going to. I talk to a lot of customers where they start off the conversation with, well, 2 years ago we moved to a colo thinking that was going to get us the benefit from the cloud, but, right? That's the beginning of the sentence. And that's hard to hear because a lot of really well-meaning people worked very, very hard to make that successful. They just didn't have the right strategy. They didn't have the right leadership. And so the most successful people create a balanced portfolio when they look at their infrastructure and their architecture, right? They're focused on security, liquidity, and growth, just like in your finances. Security, it's got to be secure. It's got to tie into your network. You've got to be able to meet all your compliance rules and regulations, and you have to have, the confidence to understand what that means. Liquidity, we have to be able to get to our data. On-prem data centers typically have data locked up in these relational database silos or very strict hierarchies. The cloud allows us to be more flexible if we want to. If we don't, then great. But if we want to and we want to make data more available, we can put it in things, in services in the cloud, like a Spark or a Hadoop layer or a data lake or something like that, where it's a little bit less managed, not less secure, but less managed. In other words, we don't have to back it up and restore it and watch our T-logs and all those kinds of things, right? Where customers can get access to it, your users can get access to it, your business can get access to it directly, right? We also need to be able to focus on growth. So how are we going to grow and support this business? I have so many customers who have what we call a cloud emergency. They have to go to the cloud because their hardware refresh is coming up, their Teradata contract is running out, their Oracle contract just got upped again for like the 4,000th time, and they're on a time clock, right? The worst way to go through any migration is on a very hard, short time clock. I think we can all probably agree on that, right? That doesn't make anything any easier. But the good news is it's not that complicated to think through how you want to go to the cloud. The biggest mistake, the number one mistake, this is mistake number one that we're going to go through today, but the number one mistake that I see customers make is they're overthinking it. I had a meeting with a customer in New York the other day, and they said, well, we've been planning for our cloud migration for 9 months. And I said, wow, it's like having a baby, 9 months. Like, what? Show me what you got, right? And they had a 12-slide PowerPoint. They said all these departments collaborated, and that is a lot of work for 12 slides. I just say, guys, has this been like a part-time? No, we've got a dedicated team doing this. I'm going, guys, you're really overthinking this, right? And what it really comes down to when you want to move to the cloud is basically like 4 things. And so I'm going to run through those for you right now. Number one, what absolutely under no circumstances can leave the premises. So in your organization, you'll have a different answer for that than other people, right? There are good and bad reasons to leave things on premises. Very few of them anymore revolve around security. Security is a thing a lot of organizations hide behind because they don't really understand how to get to the cloud. So they just say, well, it's not secure enough, so we're not going to do it. In reality, Azure especially is incredibly secure, but you definitely have to understand how to achieve that level of security, because just like you put all that effort and time in on premises, you need to do the same thing in the Azure cloud. Second question, what makes sense to do in the cloud? So data workloads and scale out web workloads and web services and APIs and anything that's basically moving data or high transaction throughputs, all that stuff is pretty much perfectly made for the cloud because you get the flexibility to scale out, scale back. You pay for what you consume, right? You're in a much better economy when you're up in the cloud. And so you think through what makes sense in that cloud. Number 3, how do we make them work together without a lot of administration? That's where Azure really, I think personally, Azure shines, right? We've got things like ExpressRoute and networking options that are going to make your hybrid strategy really work. SQL 2016 and 2017 work very well on-premise, stretched to the cloud as well as, of course, running in the cloud in 2017 on Linux, right? So we even have opportunities to centralize our OS footprint, right? If you have a big Oracle or DB2 shop and you only want to run one OS, which would make life a lot easier. Again, we've got SQL 2017 that runs on Linux, and that, of course, runs on-premise and in the cloud. And number 4, how do I make sure my data is secure wherever it is, available to who needs it, and ready to be leveraged for new projects? Well, that's not just a cloud question, but it's something that can be messed up in a migration and needs to be taken into account. So what data do I have right now, like we mentioned before, that's kind of locked up and siloed, right? That's one thing we got to think about. How do we get that out, right? How do we get that out to people? Still make sure that it's secured and compliant, but make it more available? How do we use tools like Power BI so that we don't have to prescribe how our business is going to use the data? They get to be the business and understand how they're going to create value, create insight, drive new opportunities. They get to decide that by being able to do the analysis and drive what they want to drive from the data. And the way we do that is by making sure that we understand cloud security, our cloud data platforms like SQL DB, Azure SQL Data Warehouse, we've got HD Insight, Spark, Data Lake, blob storage, table storage, queues. There's all sorts of places to put data in Azure. It just depends on what you want to do with it. And the nice thing is they're all designed to work together. This is not some big disjointed process, right? All of these different services are designed to work together, and really they're designed around patterns that make this, pretty straightforward for a lot of workloads, right? And that's enabled us to do some pretty cool things, which we'll talk about in a minute. So hopefully some of us have escaped the pickle jar, but some of us I think are probably still trapped in our pickle jar. And so we're going to get out of the pickle jar. We're going to get a balanced portfolio. We're going to get that plan going. And so I want to talk to you about the 5 things that the most successful companies have in common. And I'm not just going to say they all hired Pragmatic Works, right? Because I'm not talking just about our customers. I'm talking about very successful organizations that have big cloud case studies, and then of course the ones that we've worked with as well. So how do we escape the pickle jar? Well, the transition from that jar mentality to a balanced portfolio requires what? It requires a plan. So we got to start with a plan. Just like your financial plan, you got to have the right advice. We talked about that before. You don't show up to pick up something amazing and valuable without the right advice. Then the decisions become simple and the returns become apparent, because the right advice brings the right voices, the right context into the room to say, hey, think about this, this, and this. Here's the reasons why you would want to pick each of these. And we go from you having to think about every possible option and concern down to shrinking to the things that you really need to be able to focus on and make decisions. So we all like to learn from those folks who've gone before. So let's take a look at what those companies have in common. Number 1, they understand their environment, but they did not all start off by understanding their environment. Some of them really had to go through an assessment or a review effort to understand, well, how many servers do we have? You have no idea how many customers I talk to who cannot, in 60 minutes or less, produce an exact list of, let's just say, SQL servers. They can't. They don't have reliable inventory. And so that's actually one of the things that Pragmatic Works built, was something to help really drive that, because it's difficult for a lot of our customers. So do you have a complete map of your data, your server, your cloud estate, right? The apps, what's going on? Do you have that? Most companies don't when they start the process. That's okay. It's pretty easy to create. We can actually do it pretty fast. Second is they partner with the business and application team. So each role in the platform and the applications has different knowledge. You need a way to bring that knowledge together and keep it that way. So if IT ran the world, it would look very differently than if business ran the world. And I bet you if we asked the business, they would say, well, if you let IT do it, it would all be super tightly regulated and it would be the most well-run organization that nobody could use, right? And if you ask IT, they would say, well, business would just change everything all the time and everything would be breaking and it would all fall apart and wouldn't be usable, right? Well, you're both a little right, and you're both probably a little wrong, right? And what you can get from that is that the business needs speed and agility, and they're focused on how to use it. And IT is focused on how to make sure it's there to be used, right? And those are 2 very different sets of concerns. And so you can't do this in a vacuum. You got to get everybody together and talk about the goals and what each group needs to get out of the benefits of moving to the cloud, which also means that they both need to understand what benefits are available and how they might take advantage of those, right? Number 3, it's probably not good, I'm already losing my voice. Number 3, you define clear priorities. What's a priority? Priorities are crucial, and they're a key part to our approach and every smart approach, I think, to cloud strategy. Do you know what platforms are best fit for a cloud model? Do you know what enhancements that's going to provide? If you don't, let us know. We'll talk to you about it. We'll just help educate you. That's always fun for us. We have to make sure before anybody gets started, that we have the next milestone, the next finish line in sight. And that can't be a 3-year out kind of thing. Well, over the next 3 years, we have this vision, right? Typically, if a planning meeting for one of these migrations starts with the word vision, I typically know it's too long term, right? It's great to have a long-term vision. I'm not anti-vision, don't get me wrong. But if we're talking about trying to achieve value in a 6 to 18-month period, that's what we got to focus on, right? And then we got to set smaller milestones. We pioneered Agile data warehousing and Agile BI. People thought we were crazy. They said data warehousing projects take years and years, and we're like, but they don't have to, right? It's the same thing with cloud migrations. They don't have to. There is a better way, I promise. Number 4, they invest in their team's capabilities and competence. We're talking about getting cloud confident. You listed skills as a concern. I get that. Totally new stuff to learn. There's new services every week. There's new releases for those services every week. It is hard even for us to keep up with sometimes. So we've built systems to make sure that we can keep up with that. But much of this is going to be new for you and your teams. So who's going to help them adjust the approach that you have now to the cloud? The best firms really invest in training and time for maybe an expert to ride along with them, or for them to participate with the partner when we're doing projects together. Whatever the best method is, right? We've done it a few different ways. It's got to be done. It can't be, well, we're going to bring in Pragmatic Works and have them do our migration, and then they're going to hand the keys in a ceremony, and we're going to cut the ribbon, and everything's going to be great. That's never going to work. We won't even take projects that are pitched that way, because we believe that the best result is working with you to achieve this balanced portfolio, right? And last but not least, they align with the right partner. You knew this one was coming, right? But balancing your daily workload with new innovation is probably the most difficult challenge that your CIOs and your leadership and your teams really have, right? It's hard to do all the work you have to do, plus learn something new, plus then deploy the new thing and do it right. So this is where we kind of take the heavy lifting on some of those things, and ramp up your team over time and get all your operations integrated and all that kind of stuff, right? So we're here to help, but most companies are successful because of their commitment, their internal communication that sometimes we have to do a lot of help with, their understanding and investment in their team, and then having the right partner to cut those decision cycles down from weeks and months down to hours, right? That's a big deal. And so if you think about, how you can get cloud confident, we have a couple of, kind of our approach that mimics what we know to really work for a lot of organizations. And so this cloud confident approach was developed over 10 years by our team of expert architects. You guys know them. They're fantastic. We've got cloud engineers, industry experts. We're the preferred partner for Microsoft to do cloud migrations in the US, because our approach increases success exponentially, but it also reduces your risk. The biggest fear in a cloud migration for most of our customers is just around risk, right? There's so many different things that can fail, balls that can drop, other things that can go wrong while we're in this migration state, right? While the migration is sort of cooking. And so our goal is to do the migration in a very finite amount of time, right? Through these iterations, so that it reduces the risk. And so number one, we create that roadmap, right? We have tooling and capability to get that assessment, the mapping, the compliance, all that stuff mapped and done in a matter of days to weeks, as opposed to months and months of manual labor. The second thing we're going to do once we have that plan is help you identify those priorities, right? We're going to walk through, help you do that. Our tooling will help do that based on fit and polish of different performance metrics that we grab. And then we recommend we start with a lift and shift type of mentality, because what that's going to do is it's going to get your appropriate systems and services into the cloud very quickly. It's the fastest way to make the move. So it reduces your risk very, very fast. And then we can move immediately into the optimized phase, right? Once it's up there, we put the tooling against it, we put the monitoring and the metrics against it, and we're able to say, hey, okay, great. We moved this VM. It's way too big for what it needs in the cloud, so we can shrink that down and save you, $5,000 a year per VM. Or we found a customer the other day that had over-provisioned their Hadoop infrastructure. We saved them $200,000, I think, in about a day. So this kind of stuff is really important. That's why it's the #1 focus area for customers right after they get to the cloud, right? And then once we go through that optimization phase, which again can be done in a month, 2 months, 3 months, just depends on what your cycle looks like and how many systems you have. That we can get to the modernize phase, and that's where we step back and we say, okay, everything's now that needs to be is in the cloud. It's running on the right size footprint, so you're cost optimized. You're not paying any more than you need to for cloud services. Your team's been trained. They understand how to manage these different cloud services and systems. Now let's take a look at what these additional services can get us. So do we have a web app that makes sense to re-platform into a PaaS solution? Do we have a data warehouse that really should move off of this VM and move to Azure Data Warehouse with maybe a Spark endpoint on it, or direct connection to Azure Machine Learning or Stream Analytics? Those modernization opportunities, we also have tooling that'll help surface those and help show us exactly what those opportunities look like, which is again going to speed the decision time, reduce the risk, increase the confidence, right? And so that's really what Cloud Confident is all about, guys. It's about understanding that there is a pattern for success, and that is really understanding the plan, having the right internal relationships or creating them as part of the process, moving the information into the cloud in a nice, tight, boxed way that reduces risk, and then going through, shrinking that cost footprint, crunching it down. It's very easy to do, creating automation around that so you don't have to worry about it going forward. And then saying, hey, there's probably some percentage of these workloads as a phase 2 that could be modernized, right? It's not every workload. You're not going to take every web app and reconvert it to a PaaS app. That doesn't make sense. You don't need to do that. That's way, worthless work. Don't do that. But your big ERP or your CRM app or one of your online, like your transaction processing app from your website, or your logistics tracking app, your manufacturing backend, those things make a lot of sense. Or your BI and data workloads. There's some incredible things coming out from Data Factory and other tools in the BI space that if you're looking to learn more about, please let us know. And that's really going to enable full enterprise BI in the cloud. We're actually designing and helping Microsoft launch those things right now. We're super pumped about it. And so there is a pattern, and that's really what I wanted you to understand today. That we have a few common roadblocks to getting that plan going, right? Budget, time, capability, concern about platform choices, things like that. And we asked you a poll question on this earlier, and the biggest one was really around team capabilities. I also saw budget and time in there. I didn't see a lot of concern about platform choices and those kinds of things, but that's good. We get a little bit different mix every week when we talk about some of these things. Team capabilities is a real thing, and certainly we of course have our ODT platform, but Azure changes so fast. You have to make sure that you have a partner aligned that is a phone call away, right? To be able to say, oh, actually, there's a new thing you need to be aware of, right? Staying in the mix is super important to really be able to drive what you're trying to get accomplished. And so we have, as I mentioned, the right tooling and some of those kinds of things. So our approach to help you overcome those, let's start with budget. We have access to special funding programs through Microsoft that will cover a portion of your POC or your cloud implementation effort. Our approach gets you to the cloud quickly, which will shrink the budget over planning it, doing it yourself, or maybe with another partner. So we're going to reduce your costs, especially over a full re-architecture, which is typically not the best first move. Our unique relationships with Microsoft give us the ability to package Azure directly into your engagement. So we actually resell Azure. So if you're not on Azure yet, we can get you spun up and set up with Azure as a first new customer. We can get all that set up for you. It's very, very straightforward and allows us to, really have kind of a single vendor, don't have to deal with all the different issues, which is really nice. Time-wise, again, we can complete some of these things in a matter of weeks. The 4-step model gets you into the cloud fast. Minimal config changes, tooling that accelerates every step. Testing, by the way, is a big part of these application migrations. Before, you could only really test the applications. Now we have Legitest, which is our data testing tool. which accelerates and automates data testing in the cloud. So we can make sure the data left your premise, arrived in the cloud, it's all matching, everything's identical. We can certify it for compliance, and we can leave those tests running for however long you want to continue to make sure that you're confident. Team capabilities. Our team is excited about working with your team. It's fun, right? We're building and growing and doing new things. Their years of expertise are going to help your team ramp up. You guys are already smart. You know what you're doing. We're just adding some new skills. That's all we're doing. And so that's really what makes a lot of that fun. We also offer the only leading enterprise learning solution for Microsoft's data and cloud platforms. It gives you enterprise reporting, management oversight, internal certificates, all that kind of good stuff. Number 4, which cloud? We're a partner. We get to choose which cloud we like to tell customers we think is the best. And if you haven't gotten that, so far, we think it's Microsoft Azure. We like the integration. We like the speed of innovation. If you're in AWS, we certainly do work there too. But typically, when we start a customer on the journey, we like to start them working towards Azure because we just know that's going to be a better outcome for everybody. Internal technology politics. This is an issue, right? We have a new CIO and he likes this, and the CFO likes this, and the IT director likes a different thing. We're a big fan of transparency drives the right discussion. And so we come in, and proving value is incredibly important to us. And so we offer some unique programs to do rapid proof of value engagements. Again, going back to some of that funding from Microsoft, to help overcome some of these internal debates, right? Most of that stuff is based on antiquated knowledge, especially in the cloud. If it's a year old, it's very old. And so our focus is on moving you forward, supporting you for the long term. And our long-term support options even include things like managed services to reduce your risk. We'll take on the chores, we'll manage the environment, keep everything nice and neat. So we can really help you in a lot of different ways. And we're pretty excited about that. It lets us get great relationships with great customers and really continue to drive some exciting things in the market. So before we move to Q&A, just real quick, I just want to say thank you. Our team's ready to move you forward. We've got assessments and strategy. There's a game plan. There's a pattern that we follow, that we adapt for every single customer based on what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it and what industry you're in and what compliance needs you have, etc. Right? We can help with your migration engagements, optimizing your current cloud. Are you in the cloud and you're spending too much? Let's fix it, right? Let's save that money. You got this jackpot. Let's make the most of it. And then, of course, if you're at the point or you reach the point where you're ready to modernize your applications, we're there to support you there as well. So I did want to leave about 10 minutes or so for questions. So it looks like mission accomplished. So I'm pretty excited about that. Erica, do we have any questions in the queue?
I see one question here. Is there an Azure migration path for BI ETL that is moving SSIS transformations, especially to Azure Data Factory?
There is, and actually we are, it's with part of the Ignite announcements that came out last week for Azure Data Factory V2. We're actually working directly with the team building that product to pilot customers on the new version. But yes, we can move SSIS packages to the cloud. We can deploy them to the cloud. We can put them in VMs. There's 4 or 5 different patterns there that we can use. And so it's a pretty exciting time for moving enterprise BI off of typically some aging hardware up into the cloud where we get a lot more flexibility. So if you're interested in something like that, I would definitely, at the end of this, you'll get a question that says, hey, would you like to talk to somebody about your cloud? Just say yes, right? And we'll have one of our architects hop on the phone with you. And no pressure, but just run through, what your questions are in more detail and actually talk about how some of those patterns might work for you. It's a great question.
All right, here's another one. What options are there for cross-database queries in multi-database data warehouse environments?
All right. There's a few different ways to tackle that. So typically, we'd like to try to look and see if that architecture really requires that, or if it could be adapted and adjusted. With managed instances that are coming out, actually they might already be out. I think they're in private or public preview right now. I hope I'm not violating any NDAs accidentally on this call. With managed SQL Server instances, there's gonna be support for that. So again, every single roadblock from a technology perspective that has been found so far is being removed as part of the Azure development cycle. And things are, if they haven't been released already, they're on their way or they're in private preview for most of those things. So we can absolutely get you access to that.
Okay. Let's see. A lot of Azure services are still, I can't read that word. Let's see. We're still contemplating moving to the cloud. Have you done any long-term cost analysis of cloud services versus on-prem?
Yeah, we have actually, and there's a couple of cloud surveys that came out this year, and that's one of those, I call it spreadsheet math, right? So depending upon who makes the spreadsheet and what their agenda is, everything works out, fine either way, right? Typically what we see for customers is once you add up the time that people are spending to manage it, which will go down in the cloud, the amount of power and cooling and all that kind of stuff that you don't have, the depreciation on the hardware, and I know there's variables and all these things, right? But if you're running your production system on hardware that's already been depreciated out, that's a different conversation. And then especially when you run in a cost optimized model, right? Which means things like nobody's using the data warehouse from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. So let's pause it. Let's not run it 24/7. Let's pause it and we'll recoup 30% of the cost. That's a huge savings. Most of our customers actually take that savings after they kind of realize it over a few months, and then they reapply it. So they actually add more horsepower to the data warehouse instance or to VMs or to certain key applications during hours when they are running, and then recoup some of that money after hours when it's not, by shrinking it down. And again, easy to do through automation. ARM templates, Azure Resource Manager is what ARM is. Easy to do all of those things. It just takes a plan and an approach and that clear priority, right? We want to save some money, we want to get flexibility, whatever those priorities are. Most of our customers saving money by going to the cloud is probably number 3 on their list, right? It's really more about flexibility and new capabilities and DR, right? The ability to manage their DR in a much better environment. You have no idea how many banks we talk to who just cannot do DR. They can't. I had a call with one yesterday, and they said we have no idea if we could restore our data environment. I don't almost know what to say on that, right? And that's where a lot of people are getting a lot of benefit out of the cloud, right? It's not. It's just removing a lot of administration and overhead. And when you take all those costs into account, it becomes kind of a no-brainer, right? But the longest term customer we have that's still seeing solid results would probably be about a 4 to 5 year customer. And they are obviously spending more now in the cloud than they were spending on premise, but they are doing a lot more, right? Over 5 years, they've acquired 3 companies. Anybody who's going through a lot of M&A, the cloud is great because we move them up, right? We've done, I don't know how many migrations for these folks over the years. Every time they buy a new company, we take everything that's in the existing company and move it up into their Azure tenant and get it all integrated and set up. And it makes life so much better because we know where the destination is and what they're trying to do. So I hope that answers your question.
All right, Adam, I don't have any more questions here. I don't know if anyone has any more they want to write in the chat box, but I'm not getting any more questions.
All right.
All right.
Well, I think we're good then, Erica. If anybody has any other questions, please feel free to send them in.
All right, well, I'll go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you, Adam, for presenting today, and thank you, everyone, for joining our free webinar. As always, we get this question every single week. We do record all of our sessions, and we will be sending all registrants a follow-up email that includes a link to that recording. You can also find the recording on our website at Pragmatic Works. I usually post it a few hours after the webinar ends. So thanks again for your time, and we look forward to seeing you all next Tuesday for another free training session.